all I have to do today is write, I'll still find every possible other thing. I need to answer this email. I need to think about this. I need to clean this. I need like facts together, like me being a Black writer and maybe not writing traditional quote unquote romance. That can be challenging. But mainly I just hope they feel a sense of joy and warmth and love from reading these stories, because, that's what love stories are there for.
Hi guys, welcome to Black Girls Brunch. Thank you so much for joining us today for our YouTube series, A Drink With, where we speak to amazing Black British women. Today's interview is part of our Lit Black Girls season, where we're using the month of April to celebrate all things literature. We've had some great events so far, and we have amazing ones coming up. So go and check out our Instagram page and our Eventbrite page to see what's coming up. While you're here, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. I'm so excited because today I'm thrilled to be joined by Sareeta Domingo. So Sareeta is an author and she's written books such as If I Don't Have You and The Nearness of You. She is also the creator and editor and contributing writer of the romantic anthology Who's Loving You. She's contributed to a variety of publications such as Gal-Dem, Ballad and Stylist Magazine, just to name a few. Hi, Sareeta. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
I'm going to start off with the question that I ask every guest, just because it lets us know a little bit more about you and just, it kicks us off.
Yeah.
Why writing? Why did you choose to be an author?
I don't know. I think it's just writing's the thing that I've always been good at, I guess, and kind of drawn to as the way to express myself. I guess it's just been something that I've always liked to do, from childhood. And when I got the opportunity to kind of put my writing out there in a more sort of public way, I kind of drifted into it. And I work as an editor, so like books and publishing have just always been my thing. So I guess it just kind of chose me, I guess.
I like that, it chose me. It's nice. It's a nice answer to that. I totally understand as well. Have you always been doing writing, like from a young age, or?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Like if I ever had the opportunity to write a story or whatever for school, or even up through university, like if there was a way to respond using fiction rather than like writing an essay or whatever, that would be my choice. And when I I got a job in publishing, I worked in a bookshop for a while, got a job in publishing, and all that time I was kind of like trying to dip my toe into writing, but hadn't really had the opportunity fully until I got commissioned to write some short stories, and then it all sort of went from there.
That's amazing. So you got commissioned to write some short stories, but because I was doing some research, obviously, they came before The Nearness of You, right? The short stories.
Yeah, they did.
So then what inspired you to write, your first novel, in a sense?
I'd started writing The Nearness of You sort of while I was doing the short story thing. Like the short stories I got, they weren't something that I was sort of writing for myself in a way. I was working at a publishing company. They got the rights to publish Agent Provocateur's books. They had like collections of erotic fiction. And even though exactly, but I wasn't working in editorial or anything at that point, but I was like, I reckon I could write a short story if need be. So I kind of put my hat in the ring. They liked what I wrote and commissioned me to write like 3 or 4 short stories. And I also got commissioned to write a novella. But obviously that was to their specifications, like it needed to appeal to a particular audience. Obviously it needed to be erotica, all that kind of thing. So that was sort of, I loved doing that. It was really fun, but it wasn't like what I had chosen to write for myself.
Yeah.
Nearness of You, my debut novel, I'd been tentatively writing it, and then I kind of decided to once I'd had something published, I was like, I guess I can do this. So I sort of was a bit more committed to it, like really sat down, thought, what do I want to write? Started writing that book in earnest. And, you know, I eventually finished it, had a completed draft, went out, got an agent. I mean, that makes it sound very simple, but like, but yeah, that was sort of how it worked out. I guess having something published at all did give me the confidence to think, you know, actually you can be a writer, like you can do this. So yeah.
I didn't realize that that's how it started out. I think there's such a big difference between being commissioned and, you know, having a structure which you have to stick to, and then being able to, you know, write what you want, what you feel as well. Do you prefer either one, or? I
mean, it's easier to be given some parameters to write to, because you're like, oh, okay, I need to. I mean, it wasn't like they were super prescriptive. They were just like, it needs to appeal to women age like 18 to 35 or whatever. It needed to be erotic, obviously. But other than that, and there was maybe a word cap, like a word limit. But other than that, they were like, write whatever you want, obviously. And it also had to kind of appeal to the brand. You know, it was Agent Provocateur is like a luxury lingerie brand, so you knew you were dealing with that kind of bougie area. And then, so, you know, it wasn't like they said, write this particular story. So it was still quite broad, but at least I had a sense of like, okay, it needs to be this particular thing. And it was short fiction as well. So, you know, it's less pressure in a way. I mean, there is an art to writing a short story, but it was still kind of like, this isn't so daunting. So writing a novel where it's just like, okay, go, like think of an idea kind of thing, that is liberating in lots of ways, but it is also like all the pressure is on you to think of like how you're going to structure it, what the plot is going to be, who the character, you know, it's all on you. So that is great in a lot of ways, but it's much more of a challenge as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I'm a writer, and I didn't actually, well, obviously I knew people, you know, commissioned you to write things and stories, but for me, the short form, you know, gentle parameters to write, that sounds great for me. I would absolutely love that, rather than someone just saying, okay, bye, off you go. Obviously you have If I Don't Have You, The Nearness of You. Are any of your novels based on real life or real life experiences?
No, not at all. No, they're all completely made up. I think with my debut novel, there's some quite dark themes going on in it that I thankfully haven't experienced directly myself. So no, I mean, neither of them. I mean, it would be great if some of the things in If I Don't Have You happened to me, in the sense that, you know, the male character is a film director. I love films. So like, not that I'd want to direct, but I'd love to write a film, for example. But no, other than like some of my interests bleeding through to like the characters, and maybe like elements of, you know, people who I might know or have met or whatever, they really are just completely from my imagination.
That's nice though, that's nice. And I think also a very safe answer as well. If you would have said yes, the people who knew you would be like, what? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You mentioned films, and which is like ding 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 for me. Would you want your novels to be made into, or a short story, anything? Would you want them to be made into a film?
Oh yeah, I'd love that. Yeah, I think that'd be incredible.
Who would play? Like, what actors would you want to play? Like, just choose one of the books. What actors could you see?
Ooh, that's always a tough one, because it's kind of, the characters are so cemented in my head as like them.
I know what you mean.
You know, sometimes I've thought about this and kind of thought, oh, maybe this person, maybe that person. But the more I think about it, the more I think it would kind of have to be up to the director or the casting director or whatever to kind of suggest people, and then I'd probably be like, no, that's not what they look like, or that's nothing like how I envision it. So to be honest, I don't know. I don't think I can answer that.
That's fair. And I think as well, sometimes you don't realize until you sometimes see the actor doing it. Like,
exactly.
Like when I heard that Emma Stone was going to be Cruella, I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
yeah.
But then I saw the trailer and I wasn't mad at it. I was like, okay.
Yeah, so you kind of need to go with, I think once something like a book becomes a film, or, you know, it's like, it's kind of your baby, but it's not, you know, that will become a collaborative thing where, you know, other people get to have input and a say, and it's about who's available and who wants to do it and how the actor interprets things. So yeah, I mean, I think if I ever got to that stage, fingers crossed, you know, I'd see what happens at that point.
Oh, it's exciting. I hope you do get to that stage, if that's what you want as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talking a little bit more about you as a writer, actually, that's true. Would you say you're an author or writer or both? Because some people are a bit...
I don't really distinguish. I guess an author. I think when people say writer, I would kind of interpret that as like, maybe you write some non-fiction stuff, maybe you write articles, maybe you write, you know, 2 commissions and all that kind of thing. I'd say that writer, whereas author, like maybe there's a bit more of a sense of ownership to that as a word, which I like. So I guess author, yeah.
Yeah, I like that. When do you think someone could call themselves an author? Like, is it after their book is selling? Is it?
No, I think as soon as you come up with an idea and you make the commitment to yourself as much as anyone to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard or whatever and start writing something that has come out of your own imagination, you're an author.
That's nice. I think a lot of times we're like, oh, we're not there yet, or we, you know, we have this kind of grand idea of what it means to be, you know, whatever you're working towards.
Yeah.
So it's nice to just, it's kind of a relief to think, actually, no, I'm an author, I've got an idea, I'm writing.
Exactly. I think that's the key thing. You need to actually be writing. I think it's so easy. It's easy, even after you've had like stuff out, it's easy to just think, yeah, this is what I do. But if you don't actually sit down and do it every day or as much as you can, you're kind of not that thing. You're just a person who thinks about doing that thing.
No, drag me. Drag me, because I need to hear that personally. How would you describe your writing process?
I don't know. I kind of change depending on what I'm working on. So like for my debut novel, I plotted that out. Well, I kind of started off being much more about like, right, this is what's going to happen in this chapter. This is what's going to happen in this chapter initially.
Right.
And I started doing it that way, like following a plan that I'd already written down. But as I got further and further into the book, it kind of took on a life of its own to the point where I didn't need to plan in that way. And since then, I've been maybe a bit freer with how I work. So like for If I Don't Have You, I just kind of made notes. I started thinking about what I wanted to happen and just made like maybe even a notebook full of notes, but not a full-on like plot of what was going to happen. And then I started writing after I'd, you know, been through that sort of thinking process and writing down ideas. And I think that's primarily how I work on novel ideas now. With the short story that's in Who's Loving You, I just took inspiration from a photograph that I had seen in the newspaper in The Guardian like years ago. I'd cut it out and it was just so beautiful to me, the image. And I just wrote from there, like I didn't really plan anything. I just kind of wrote it and saw how it came out.
That's lovely.
Yeah, so it's different for each project, I think.
Yeah, I think as well, it's so cool that you can kind of write it. It's really cool to start like with the blocks of what you want to happen and then write from there, because sometimes when you think, oh my gosh, I have to write a whole book or I have to write a whole whatever, it can be overwhelming. It can be like, where does one start?
Yeah.
Do you start like beginning to end even in the blocks, or do you maybe like have the blocks and then start writing the middle, or you know?
I usually do write like start to finish, and then go back over it and back over it and back over it till it's like halfway decent. But actually the book that I'm writing at the moment is the first time I started writing it, and then I was like, oh, I need a whole other bit of this. So I just stopped writing and wrote that bit. That's the first time I've done that. I don't usually do that. We'll see how it turns out. But I think that was useful. I think that's been so far it's been a useful way of doing things. But usually I'm like quite chronological with it. Yeah.
Something that I struggle with, and I've heard a few people struggle with, is pace, mainly in script writing, but I think it's still kind of, it's the same.
Yeah.
How do you add pace to your books? That's my question.
I think that is something that comes in the editing process for me. Sometimes, certainly I can feel like, this part of this book is dragging, but the main thing for me, at least, is to just get it all down, and then you can worry about like, is this bit slow, or do I need to like inject some more energy in this part? But I feel like for me, you can't do anything with a blank page. That's always been my philosophy. So, and because I work as an editor generally, I guess that's sort of a natural thing for me to like wrestle something into shape once it's already there. So yeah, I think for me it's about having the whole thing, I guess it's like a piece of marble or whatever. You start chipping away at bits, and then when it's right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in terms of how to do it, I think you kind of just have to go by instinct, and maybe give yourself some distance, like from your manuscript. Say you've written something and you have a feeling it's lacking in energy, leave it for like as long as you can, basically 2-3 weeks, a month, whatever. Come back to it, reread it, and then you probably will have more clarity about what needs doing to it.
Yeah, that's great. That's actually really great advice. I mean, I didn't forget. I was just like, when you said I'm an editor, I was like, yeah. Do you edit your own like work, or do you have?
Well, yeah, I think like all authors do before they give it to anybody else to read. But I think for me, it's because I do it for other people, like in my day job, and I edited Who's Loving You, for example, even though it was a project I put together separate from my sort of work. I think it's just something that I'm already familiar with doing, so I can kind of do it for myself in a more emphatic way than maybe some people, writers who aren't editors or whatever. But I think it's a process that anyone who wants to be an author needs to kind of learn to do. I think you need to be able to edit your own work and be critical of what you've written, ruthless with what you've written, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. And also not precious.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can cling to things, and sometimes it doesn't work. You have to take it out.
But never fully delete. Like if there are parts of something that I've written that I think this kind of doesn't work, I save it in another document, not just fully delete it so you can never retrieve it when you realize, no, actually that was genius, it just needed to be tweaked or whatever. So.
No, that is honestly, you're so right, because that applies to like script writing, playwriting, just say. And also, you never know. I know somebody who had a first draft of something, wrote something else, but didn't delete that first draft, and then that first draft became something else. So in the end, had two, films out of two, like the same draft, if that makes sense. So yeah, you're right. Always keep your stuff. Is there a specific thing that you struggle with during your writing process? And if there is, how do you overcome it?
I think one of the things is procrastination. It's so hard to actually get going. Because I like, once I'm writing, I can write relatively fast, and like if things are flowing well, it goes well. But it's about that starting, like even if I have a full day where I'm like, all I have to do today is write, I'll still find every possible other thing. I need to answer this email, I need to think about this, I need to clean this, and which so many people do. But to try not to get too distracted, practical things I do, there are a couple of apps I use.
Yes.
There's an app called Cold Turkey, which you can put on your laptop, which you can block websites. So like it's block Twitter, but you can say which websites you can access. So say you need to access Wikipedia or whatever for research.
Yeah.
And you can set how long you want that to be the case. And then if you try and go on the internet, it has like an inspirational quote that comes up, like about not being distracted. That's very useful. And there's on my phone, there's an app called Forest where it grows a little tree if you don't touch your phone. That's really useful. Yeah, so both of those are like genuinely just practical things that I use to like stop myself procrastinating. I also try as much as I can not to go back over what I've written.
Yes.
You can get really bogged down in like perfecting the paragraph you wrote yesterday or whatever and not actually progressing forward. So yeah, I try not to go back and back and back and just move forward.
Yeah, I love that. I remember someone said to me, oh, you know, write in chunks. So you'd write for an hour and then have a break for 20 minutes. Or someone else said she writes until her laptop's going to die. And then she knows she needs to have a break.
Yeah.
But if you have a really good laptop, that's a bit like...
The battery on my laptop is terrible. So that actually reminds me that I need to plug this in.
Everything happens for a reason.
Exactly.
What is your, I guess, favorite and least favorite part of the whole publishing process? My
favorite part is getting positive feedback from readers. Particularly, I mean, obviously having your book published in the first place is an amazing part of it. But yeah, those moments when someone's read your work and you feel like it's really connected with them in the exact way that you intended. I've been lucky to have that a few times, and you're just like, yes, this is why I do this kind of thing. So that's really great. I think some of the obvious challenges are being a Black writer. It can be tough to get, particularly because I write primarily romantic stories, or I have been doing for, you know, the books that I've had out so far. Being seen or promoted or whatever in the way that I might like to be, because I think a lot of publishing is still very focused on Black writers or writers of colour writing a particular type of thing.
Yeah.
About race specifically, or about trauma, mining their trauma, or having to specifically reference their race or their background or whatever, which is not something that I shy away from in my writing, but it's certainly not the primary aspect of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I think that can sometimes be confusing for publishing. Yeah. And I think even in the realm of romance fiction, maybe my writing isn't quite traditional, in the sense that sometimes people say, oh, your writing's kind of literary for romance, or like it doesn't fully adhere to a really trope-based kind of romance, which there's plenty of room for. But I think those two facts together, you know, like me being a Black writer and maybe not writing traditional quote unquote romance, that can be challenging.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And it's funny what you said about you know, it not other writers kind of writing maybe about trauma or about race, or, you know, about what happens next, whatever. Like you said, that's great, those books are definitely needed, but then romance is needed, sci-fi is needed.
Exactly.
Some people don't want to read about you know, I don't know how, whatever. So it is, and representation really, really is important in. So also thank you for what you're doing for us. It's great. Well, you created and curated and contributed a story and wrote the anthology Who's Loving You. Can you tell us, like, in your own words, a little bit about the book?
Obviously I had a couple of novels out, but I just kind of had this idea for maybe putting together a collection of stories by, you know, a bunch of people writing love stories, and not necessarily with a super strict parameter, like this is exactly what kind of love story I want, but just a general romantic story written by different British women of colour. And it was really just like a really vague idea. And I was having a meeting with someone at Trapeze about a completely separate project, and she was just like, oh, do you have any other ideas? So I told her about this sort of vague idea for an anthology of stories, and she really loved it. And they commissioned, you know, ultimately they bought the idea. So it wasn't actually a book that existed, it was just kind of an idea. And then I was like, oh right, so now I have to like approach people and see if they'd be willing to write a story for this collection. And so I was lucky that lots of people were very receptive to the idea. I kind of had like a relatively short list of people that I wanted to approach for the project, because it just felt like, you know, other than maybe a handful of writers that were writing romantic stories, like particularly in the UK, like obviously Talia Hibbert, and like a handful of others, it's really quite hard to like immediately recall. I was like, there aren't many women of colour writing romantic stories. Bolu, of course, Bolu Babalola. But like, yeah, I kind of wanted there to be a collection of stories that were for us and for like these underrepresented people. So I started approaching a bunch of writers who I admired, or people who I knew or had a sense they could write, but hadn't necessarily published fiction before. And I was really lucky that they were so receptive, and that all their stories were so fantastic. So I started putting the project together, and yeah, obviously I wrote a story myself, and I was editing. I started like giving each of the writers feedback, and giving them notes. They'd send it back to me. So it's like quite a lot of project management as well.
Yeah, it's a big process.
But end of the day, I think it's come out really well. Like I've been so pleased with the response. It's been fantastic.
That's really good. That's like amazing. Also, quick plug, you know, if you're looking for another writer for volume 2.
Okay.
Obviously, by having the idea, you obviously saw a need for it, or like, so I guess why did you see, like, what is the need for Who's Loving You in society today?
I mean, I think romance or love stories in particular are very important in terms of how we as a society see ourselves. Like, who's deserving of love, who's deserving of being seen as desirable. Right. I think if that's lacking, then you know you're like screwed as a society. If people who are marginalized or underrepresented already are also not seen as worthy of love, in, you know, not necessarily only in a romantic sense, but in a romantic sense as well. Yeah. I think that's, you know, I do mention it in the introduction to Who's Loving You, but I genuinely think it's dangerous. So having love stories that are written by people from so-called marginalized backgrounds is important, because we get to represent ourselves, and we also get to show society at large that we are worthy of love, which is, you know, an obvious statement. Of course we are. But when you can only sort of count on one hand the number of writers who are writing in this space who are from underrepresented backgrounds, that you know, that needs redressing. And so I kind of was hoping to do a little bit towards that with this book.
I think you, first of all, definitely have, and I totally agree with you, because I think it was a lot later on in my life where I first saw a love interest that looked like me, and not just not just Black, but, you know, plus size, like you mentioned, Talia Hibbert, you know, a lot of her characters are differently abled.
Yes, exactly.
All these things are so important in just adding to, you know, the fabric of what creates literature.
Yeah.
So you had 10 writers, one of which was you.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more specifically about the inspiration behind your story?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I had I'd torn a picture out of a newspaper. Genuinely, it must be like 10 years ago. It's all like worn now. If I had it down here, I would show you. But it was a picture of a soldier cradling a woman who, she was a migrant woman who just washed up on the beach in Spain. And she's incredibly beautiful. I think she was an East African migrant, and the soldier was from Spain or whatever, wherever she had washed up ashore. And he's holding her, keeping her warm. And it was just such a beautiful image that I was like, I need to keep this. And you know, when it came around to thinking of an idea for the short story for Who's Loving You, I was looking at that picture and I was like, I want to write a story about this. I didn't want the guy to be a soldier because that has some like odd connotations and stuff. Yeah. So I decided to make the male character a Black British surfer. I don't know anything about surfing, but I was like, I needed a reason for him to be on the beach more than anything, early in the morning. And I watched a very short documentary on YouTube about Black surfers. It was in the US, but I was like, oh, that's so intriguing because it's another area that is sort of viewed as predominantly a white.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, why don't I make him a surfer? And he discovers this woman early one morning when he's out surfing. He's, you know, like been on a tour and he's in Spain for the last bit of his holiday before he goes back to work, kind of thing. And yeah, it's kind of he helps her and then they are separated for a length of time and then they get an opportunity to reconnect. And because, you know, they had this spark between them when he helped her initially. So yeah, that was the inspiration behind it. I just wanted to write a story about these people and yeah, about second chances, I guess.
I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? And it's just the layers, and it's just the thought, and it's just like, you know, you just makes your head go ping, ping, ping. Like, it's so cool. And even just it's not even tiny, but even the fact that he's a Black man and he's a surfer, and it's like, yes. I'm even speechless, but yes, we love it. What do you want women to take away from Who's Loving You?
I want them to feel like this is a book they can turn to and not have to make those mental leaps that we often have to when reading a story. You know, when you're reading a story, you kind of want to feel empathy with the characters and you want to understand where they're coming from. And you can do that with any story. You can do that with a horse or an alien or whatever. But sometimes you do want to read a story where you're like, I understand where these characters are coming from just inherently, and I don't have to do that leap of like, okay, it's a white character, but blah blah blah. So that I want women of color to feel represented within the stories, but even if they're not women or not people of color, I just want people to see this book as demonstrating the range of types of stories that we can have about love. I hope that they will discover some writers they may or may not know about, or people that they didn't expect to be able to write in this way. But mainly I just hope they feel a sense of joy and warmth and love from reading these stories, because, you know, that's what love stories are there for.
That's lovely. It's really nice. Talking about what you want your readers to take away from it, what have your responses been so far from the book?
They've been exactly what I've wanted them to be for the most part. You know, people feeling, in particular, you know, readers of colour have been like, oh, this is what I've been waiting for. I'm so excited. You know, it is quite a beautiful book, like just in and of itself. So I think people have really liked just the package of it, which is really nice. You know, like we put a lot of thought into how to package the book. So that's been really gratifying. And people have just like really loved the range of stories that, you know, even though they're all love stories, there really is like a real breadth of different types of storytelling in the book. That people have really responded to, and because they're short stories, you can like dip in and out. There's less pressure to kind of like, oh, I have to read this whole book cover to cover. And I think because of the situation the whole world is in at the moment, our attention span isn't necessarily that long. So it's nice. I think people have liked having a collection you can dip in and out of and like just enjoy, you know.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I agree with the fact that being able to dip in and out of means you can also take a break. You can choose, like when you're going to read it, like, okay, I'm going to read, you know, finish a short story today, and then it's just nice to be able to have that kind of control and not feel like you have to finish a book, because if you're anything like me, you have to finish the book in one sitting. Stay up till 4 a.m. Obviously we've touched on you know, representation of women of color, marginalized women. Are there any other perspectives or beliefs that you have challenged with this anthology?
That's probably for somebody else to say. You know, I think I've done what I set out to do, and I've included the range of women writers that I wanted to include, that primarily because I knew that they would write great stories, like not because of any particular reason, like I need to include this person because of that.
Right.
And I didn't feel like I needed to sort of deliberately represent loads of different marginalized identities. That's really hard to do anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're never going to be able to satisfy that. And there are only 10 stories in the collection. So, yeah, I mean, I think I wasn't trying to be too deliberate in that sense of like I need to tick loads of boxes or anything like that.
I think that's fair, and I think as well it's about trusting your audience and or readers, and just trusting that what you have to say is going to come across, and what they get from that is what they get from that.
Exactly.
What's the best thing about your job?
I think the freedom to like enter other worlds and really imagine, you know, it's the sort of, as a writer, you can literally do whatever you want. I mean, hopefully. It's interesting that the further you go down your career as a writer, the more there's like expectations put on you. Like with my debut novel, I didn't really think I have to do this, I have to satisfy a particular audience. Whereas the further along I've gone, the more conscious I've been. Maybe it's the pressure I put on myself, but to think, you know, you should do this, you should do that, it should be a particular type of story, particularly like it needs to be a romantic story, for example, because you started off romance and that's what people expect, kind of thing. But I think now I feel less not that I felt hemmed in. I love writing romantic stories, but I think I feel more freedom now to think, well, yeah, there can be romance, but what else is going to be happening? I think that's the best part, is just being able to kind of write whatever, you know, write whatever comes from my imagination and have it end up shaped into a thing that other people can consume and enjoy. Yeah,
it is an amazing feeling as well.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you don't feel hemmed in, which is great, because I know a lot of people do feel like, oh, I've started with this and now this is my life. But do you actually want to write like any other genres, like besides romance?
Yeah, I mean, probably, I think anything I write ends up having like a romantic thread in it, because who doesn't love love?
No, right?
So, I think that's something that will probably always be a part of my writing. But, and you know, it's hard to think that I'd write in like a wildly different way. Like I don't write poetry, I'd love to write a screenplay. That's the kind of thing I'd like to try. But generally speaking, as an author, your writing just comes out how it comes out, you know. So would I like to try other genres? Maybe, and maybe I kind of am doing something a bit different to what I've done so far with the book I'm writing at the moment. But yeah, I think I do enjoy the sort of arc of a romantic story. So that will probably always be there in some way, shape or form.
Good. I mean, we love to see it. Like you said, who doesn't love love? Do you, as a obviously accomplished writer or author yourself, do you have any advice for other authors out there? And not necessarily like new, just authors in general, because I find that sometimes people cater to like new authors or young authors, which is great, but everyone needs advice. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I think just really practical things like holding yourself to account and not just sort of thinking you're a writer, but being a writer, like actually doing it. Even if it's like setting yourself a goal, like I'll write for 20 minutes a day, or I'll like write during this program I don't really like on my phone. Anything that sort of progresses your ambitions as a writer, I think is really, really important. And trying not to get too bogged down in like, I need to know everything there is to know about writing before I can start. You know, we're natural storytellers, and I think that's even more true for people from like African backgrounds or like, you know, or diasporic backgrounds like that, where that is like an inherent part of our culture. I think embracing your natural talents as a storyteller, regardless of who you are, is really important. When we were kids, we just made up stories without thinking, I need to read 10 books about technique and I need to do a course and blah, blah, blah.
You're right.
Like ultimately, we need to trust ourselves as artists. So I think that's really important to do, to believe in yourself. And like, if you don't believe in your own talent, who else is going to? Nobody. So I think that's really important. But yeah, I think my main advice would just be to actually do the work.
Yeah, stop thinking about it, just do it.
Yeah. I mean, I need that advice daily. So.
Right? You mentioned the book you're writing now. Are you allowed to, what are you writing? Tell us, we want to know.
I'm probably not going to say too much about it beyond the fact that, yeah, it's a little bit different to what I've written thus far. It's maybe a little bit more experimental.
Okay.
Kind of, like not really, but yeah, the story is more experimental than I will have done before.
So it's like an experimental story still with a romantic thread?
Yeah.
Okay. And do we know when we can expect it? What should we be looking at?
Not yet.
Okay.
No.
And apart from that book you're writing now, do you have any other projects or future plans that you can tell us about, or we should look out for, or anything like that?
Not strictly speaking at the moment, no. I'm just kind of like, it's been such a mad ride having like Who's Loving You out, and If I Don't Love You came out last year along with the YA book that I wrote. So it was like, it's been quite an intense year or two of like having stuff. So I'm trying to take a bit of the pace out of it and like do something a bit different and really think about what I want to do next and like change up a few things. So yeah, we'll see.
But I think that's great, and I think how amazing that you have that space and that, you know, you're to do that. Absolutely. I think that's great. So these are just 8 questions that you're going to answer for our patrons, and if anyone does want to see these questions, see the answer to these questions, then please do check out the link in our description box. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sareeta. We really appreciated it. And I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was great. I hope you had fun as well.
I did. It was great. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Please don't forget to like this video and share it with a friend. And also, please do subscribe to our channel. And if you'd like to keep up to date with all Sareeta's work, then all of her information we're going to put in the description box below. So go and check it out.